All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. My name is Dane Liebermann, and I will be talking about my teardrop adventures or adventure tonight. As you can see, I think all of you saw on Zoom in Zoom land, but I built the teardrop, which is outside there. There'll be plenty of photos in the presentation.
Can you just make sure it's being recorded?
Yeah,
It is?
It is.
Okay, cool.
All right, perfect. So, as most of you know, I am a member of the line crew. I started here, I think, in 9th grade, way back when, and I've been living here about 3 days a week this summer, actually, in the teardrop. Here are some photos that I think represent some part of my life. I know that in the description of this talk, it said I was going to be talking about my trip to India, or my year abroad in India. I will mention it a little bit, but unfortunately I do not have time to go into that right now. On the upper left, this is my Indian host family. I stayed in Kolkata for 10 months during my junior year of high school, and this was my second host family. I switched 2 months in. And this picture right here, right to the right of that, is a picture of me eating meat finally, because my host family was vegetarian. So whenever I got a chance, I would go over to friends' houses who were they were Bengali, which is they were local people, and they ate meat. So that's where I got my fill of protein. And as you can see, I really like to build things and work with wood in general. And I've been doing that for quite a while. And that was one of the main reasons that I took on this building project, building the teardrop, because I was able to, had the tools and experience. And down here is my family. This is us camping. Just want to thank them for providing a supportive environment through all of this and helping me achieve my goals. All right, so back to the teardrop. This photo is funny because it's actually provided a lot of my inspiration for the build. There's a lot of components about it. Initially, I always liked the idea of going on adventures, especially camping. And but I never liked how I only saw huge campers with these huge trucks or RVs pulling them around, and it didn't seem very accessible. And I didn't like the idea of being boxed into such a big vehicle, big setup, and spending a lot of money on that. So when I saw this photo, I had an initial dream of towing a small camper with a Prius, which didn't actually become a reality, but the concept stayed. And that's kind of how I settled on the teardrop design itself. I knew I wanted some kind of building design challenge, and that's where I landed. And I think another important thing to address is the reasoning behind all of it. It started way back. My family has always been into traveling and kind of adventuring around and exploring. And after my year abroad in India, I really grew to appreciate the need to get out and about and see the world. So at some point, I came back and had my senior year of high school, but I knew before I went to college, I needed some kind of break from normal life. So I started building the teardrop as kind of a fun challenge, and it morphed into an experience that I could get away and learn about myself in a different way. So I started with my design phase. Some important things that I considered was, well, money was the number one, because I didn't really want to spend a lot of money on it, and I'm glad that I didn't. And so there are certain design features, like the size, for example. I chose to make it 8 feet long, like 4 feet wide, and 4 feet tall. And that allowed me to not cut any plywood or minimal plywood. I didn't have to add on to it. And also I could just buy 8-foot 2x3s, and it worked out very well like that. As soon as you go over one of those dimensions, you end up having a lot of waste, and you have to buy a lot more material. So I figured that I can make it work with a small design. And I also like that because it's super light, and I can go a lot of places with it, and I didn't need it to be super fancy. So my initial design, I'll move this over. My initial, wait, I went one too far. Okay, so this is a very inefficient design process for me, but I use this graphing calculator called Desmos. It's online, super fun if you are a math nerd and want to go geek around with that. I used it a little bit in school, and I had seen people use it to draw things that are more visual. And so I decided that I would make the shape on Desmos using all these equations. And this was definitely way more about the process and about learning to apply this kind of, tailoring equations how I wanted them to look. And so I ended up with this. And as you can see, the units are in feet. So I have an 8-foot trailer and 4 feet high. And so this enabled me to take this whole wall and just buy a 4x8 sheet of plywood and just cut it out a little bit so I have minimal waste. And I looked, sorry, I'll show you these equations. I looked on Pinterest and Google Images for general inspiration about the shape and things like that. I didn't follow any specific plans, but I ended up with this kind of shape, not as teardroppy as some, but it does the trick. And then another important thing was the sizing. So I once again went way over my head and made myself in this to make sure that I'd have enough room. And it's pretty accurate, but as you can see, it was not necessary for me to go to such great lengths to get the person in there. But that's how I did it. And the same thing for sitting up. And that's pretty accurate. It's a pretty tight squeeze in there. Not super fun for doing anything but sleeping or reading occasionally, but it's not a great hangout spot. And then the window, I just used the same technique, and I wanted to make sure that I was debating on initially doing a skylight as well as a window, but I decided against it for a number of different reasons. It was just more complicated, the waterproofing and everything, but also I wanted that the skylight would be placed on the leading edge of the trailer, and I didn't know how strong the material I was using would be, because that's where all the wind comes down and everything. So I just have the window on the side, and it actually works perfect because I can see the stars when I'm lying down or sitting up. So, and this is my main method of cutting the window out. I just labeled a bunch of points, converted all the points into imperial units, and then mapped them out on the plywood as if the plywood was the grid. All right, and finally, I did that, printed out all that data, and then started building. So my first obstacle was the trailer, and I was looking on Craigslist for a really long time to find a utility trailer or something that I could use. But I mean, you can always find something on Craigslist, but I didn't really want to spend, $700 on a utility trailer that may or may not be good quality. So I eventually found there's a boat store in East Montpelier on the way to Barrie. It's called Gillies, and they do a bunch of, I think they also have motorcycles and stuff, but they have a boat junkyard or boat trailer junkyard. And so this is not my photo, but this is the exact trailer that I found. It was buried under a bunch of other boat trailers and in decent quality, decent shape. So I bought that for $185, which was much better compared to all the other options I had, and stripped off all the boat components, and then I ended up having to cut the tongue down because it's quite a long trailer. And then what I did is I built a deck using 2x3s and plywood, and I just bolted that to the frame of the trailer right here. So they're held in with 5/8 bolts that just go all the way through. And it's still on there, so I think it's strong enough. This is the plywood base that I built first, and I built that. And what's nice is that you can build it and then use it as a work surface for a while. So I didn't have to spread my tools way out. It was just a nice place to work. And so what I did for the walls is just take a 1/4-inch sheet of Luan plywood, and I would lay it down, mark it out based on my Desmos lines, and then cut it out. And then I would cut individual pieces of these 2x3s right here and lay them on the plywood, and then screw through from the other side and just build a frame like that. And then after I was done, I would attach them individually together so that the plywood was not the only thing holding them together. So a pretty simple design. And as you can see, I left a little room on the people on Zoom. Can you see my mouse? They can, right?
Yes.
Okay, so like right here, there's space, and I left that to attach 2x3s to go across to connect the two walls, which you'll see right here. So I didn't cut the window initially because I hadn't yet decided on what it was going to be, so I just put it up and cut it later. But and then for the front, so I used all these 2x3s, and they're about 10 inches apart. And then for the front, I just took Luan plywood, and it's actually pretty flexible, so I bent it over. And I was surprised I didn't really need I didn't need to steam it or anything like that. And I actually did it in the winter, which was probably not a good idea, but I was a little impatient. And that's why there's this seam right here, because it ripped once. So it wasn't perfect, but it made it through. And next, that's the full thing without just the Luan plywood on the side. And I think it's getting to be springtime there. Next, I ordered a bunch of epoxy from West Marine, and I put 3 coats of epoxy on the whole thing. And you can see right here, this is the edge of the fiberglass mesh. I didn't want to use fiberglass mesh on the whole thing because it soaks up a lot of epoxy and you end up using a lot more. So I just put it on the leading edge and on the corners to give it strength right there. And it turned out all right. I don't love the look of it, and I will definitely look, when I build my next one, I'll definitely look for a better system, because you can kind of see it through, and it doesn't look the best, but it does the trick. And while I was epoxying, I didn't have any workshop to put it in, so there would be all these like poor bugs that would just fly into it and get stuck there. So I decided to add some leaves as well just to add to the whole thing, to go with all the wasps that were there. And this is, I'm pretty close to finishing it here. One thing that I don't have a picture of is there's a special kind of hinge that you have to use in order for this door to be, this seam right here to be waterproof. And it's kind of looks like this. And that allows, it doesn't, I mean, unless you submerged in water, it works pretty well. So I put that on. The one issue that I had is right here, right on these corners. It's much easier to see in person, but there is a little bit of leakage that happens in a heavy rainstorm, which is not ideal. But I think the way to go is to not have the door go all the way to the ends and have it stop before you get there. And that allows you to get that a little better waterproofing in there, kind of like the back of a car. And here are just some more pictures. This is right before I left. It was Just taking photos for the insurance company, giving them a detailed report of it. And yes, I did get it insured, surprisingly. And this right here is a little vent. I didn't install any electrical system in there. I was thinking about a small solar fan, but I didn't get around to it. And so I just have a little vent that I open at night so that I have a little bit more airflow. And then this is the window right here, which is acrylic. And it's like, I forget how thick it is, but
How do you seal the window?
I use this stuff called geocell. It's just some random, like, it's really good clear caulking. It's kind of like a rubbery feel, so it's not brittle at all. And I spread that all over the inside and then pushed the window up against it. And it was kind of old, the geocell, so it didn't work super well, but it worked all right. And then on the outside, I just did like a bead around, and it works pretty well. And the acrylic is nice because it can break, but it's not, I can just easily replace it if it does, and I don't have to get like glass that is rated to be on the road or anything like that.
Is it secure just with the caulking? Or is it
Yeah. And what I also did is well, I had to like sandwich 2x3s on the inside. So I put the caulking on, and then I would put a 2x3 on the inside and drill through the whole thing, like pre-drill it and drill through, so that holds it together. I think it would have stayed with just the caulking, but I didn't really trust the waterproofing of it because it could move a little bit. And here is one of my stops before I took off out west at the airport. I spent the night here, and it worked out pretty well. This was my first night away from home, sleeping in it. And then I went on the road. So I didn't have a very detailed plan about where I was going to go. The last part of the summer, this is in 2019. The last part of the summer, no, 2020. Sorry, I'm getting that confused. Last part of the summer was very hectic because I was just trying to finish it in time to leave, and so I didn't really think at all about planning or whatnot. Tom and Jen gave me some road advice, which helped, but I was basically going out without any plan. So this is the first night in Ithaca, New York, and this is my neighbor Scylla. She had to go to Austin, Texas for her new job, so we drove for the first 4 days together, and then she went south, and I kept going west. And we spent our first night in a Walmart parking lot, and it was very nice, actually. There's a lot of weird sounds that could not be explained, but that was expected. And yeah, I expected it to be a little sketchy, but it was actually pretty nice. I guess that also depends on the Walmart too, but I forget exactly what we had.
Were campers there? People camping?
Yeah, not too many in that parking lot, but there were definitely campers there, which was nice. It's good feeling. But a lot of people would like stop and talk to me, and at first like about the teardrop, and I was on edge at first because I had no idea what to expect. But what I found over the course of the trip was people were like mostly just really curious about everything and were super nice, and I had no issues with that. Here are just some pictures of my trip. I forget exactly where that is, but definitely, I think maybe Nebraska or something like that. For any of you who have driven across the country, it's very flat and monotonous, and those are long, boring days. So I tried to stop quite often and mix it up when I could. And here's my original cooking setup, which was terrible. I don't know why, but I was convinced that I could just manage with just this small backpacking stove. And then I added a heat shield so that it was a little bit more efficient. But as soon as it got cold at all, it was just a pain to like have to deal with that with cold hands, and it took forever boil water and stuff like that. So eventually I bought just a normal Coleman stove, and that was a huge improvement. I finally made it out of the flatlands to Bighorn National Forest in Wyoming, and that was an interesting experience because it was my first mountain road, and I was a little sketched out by it, just all the gravel and bumps and super narrow, like winding mountain road. This is like at the base of it, and then it went way up. But the Teardrop did well, and I forgot to mention this is the car that I brought, a RAV4, which my parents so graciously let me bring, and it survived the trip. Sometimes when you would go faster than 60 or 65, the steering wheel would start to shake a little bit, and I had to fill up the tire every single day and check the oil all the time. But besides that, it was great. Did the job. This is my first night in Bighorn National Forest, which was really cool. Just yeah, just a great place. But it was definitely cold. And one thing that I didn't do on my Teardrop is insulate it, which was another kind of like, I cut that corner because of time and a little bit because of money. And I definitely regret it. It was definitely super cold at times. The hardest part was just the cooking outside, but it also was, I had to really bundle up to stay warm.
What month was it?
Say again?
What month?
This was September, right at the end of September, beginning of October. So I skipped a little bit of the trip, but didn't have as many photos as I would have liked. But basically, I went through Wyoming and into Yellowstone, and then I didn't actually stay very long in Yellowstone because all the campgrounds were full and it was packed. And so I just went straight up, and I stopped at Bozeman before Glacier and saw some of my friends from high school, and then kept going. And yeah, I met two people in Glacier, which you'll see in the photos coming up. Here's the first friend that I met. This is Ben, and he was road tripping from Maryland to Seattle to, he had just gotten a job at Microsoft and had his, he was defending his PhD in like 2 weeks or something like that to go work at Microsoft. And so we were having very different experiences, but it was fun to connect, and he was super nice. And I remember we were in the same campground at Glacier, and we were having a fire and cooking food all together. And so I pulled an axe out of my car to split firewood. He's like, "What the heck do you have that for?" Because he had, like, obviously he didn't bring anything like that. He had bare minimums just to like go to Seattle and everything. So that was fun. And he gave me some really good ramen that he had brought along. So yeah, before he left, we went to Buffalo Wild Wings and treated ourselves to a little snack, which was nice. And then after Glacier, I went down to Corvallis, Montana, where some of our family friends live, and they have a little ranch there, which is pretty cool. And I stayed there for the week and got a COVID test because I had a bit of a cold. They were very nice and welcoming, and it was fun to be there. It's very interesting. It's like a valley, and then you just the mountains come up really fast. And I stayed mostly in the valley because it was pretty bad weather, so I didn't get up in the mountains at all. But one of the things I did while I was there was build this bike rack, because I had the bike inside the car for most of the trip. And that was just such a hassle, because if I wanted to bike, it would take like half an hour to get it out and back in, but also just it took up a lot of space. So this was a huge improvement, and it made it through the rest of the trip. This is one of the other guys that I met in Glacier National Park. He was just a very, very nice guy who was curious about my Teardrop and invited me to his campsite for dinner. And he was super nice, and he was the kind of person who would start telling a story and like 45 minutes later, like come out of the haze like, "Oh my God, like are you still there? Kind of like, and so he had all kinds of crazy stories about his bike travels in South Korea, and yeah, just all kinds of crazy stuff. But that was fun to connect with him. And then he owns a small campground in Idaho. I'm blanking on the name of the town, but he invited me there. So after he went down, and then a couple days later, I went to his campground and hung out with him, and he showed me around. This is on one of our hikes. We went to find some hot springs, which were very successful. They were really nice hot springs, and he had a couple plum trees, and nothing to do with the plums, so I got to feast on those, which was nice. And it was just nice to have some human contact, because most of the trip I was just staying away from people and a little nervous to do anything. So it was nice to interact with some people and get out of my head for a little while. Next up, I came down through Utah, and I went across the Salt Flats. And this is actually right after I placed third in the annual drag race on the Salt Flats. There was only 2 people in the RAV4 Teardrop category. And yeah, it was a fun race, but the bottom of the car is now totally rusted out because of that. It was actually wild to just drive, and you just drive for forever and everything looks the same. So that would actually be fun to rip around on, but I did not. So, and at that point it was starting to get really cold, and so I got pretty creative about how I spent my time, because either I was hiking or in the car or something, but I couldn't just be like hanging out or I'd get really cold. And then this is just a photo of the back of the car. It was a total mess. It did the trick though. Had everything in there, including my skis right here, which I never actually used, unfortunately, but I knew that if I had the opportunity and I didn't have my skis, I would always regret it, so I had to bring them. And here are just some fun photos. I forget where exactly. This is in Utah, close to Zion, but it's not Zion. It's one of the other ones. I want to say Capitol Reef or something like that. But yeah, at this point, one of my friends from high school had flown out to Salt Lake City and met me there, and we drove back together, which was really nice to have someone to share the driving with. So we went down through Utah and hit a bunch of the national parks. We went to Zion as well, although we didn't stay there very long, because in order to get to all the good parts of the park, you had to take a shuttle bus, and we did not want to do that with COVID. So we actually, unfortunately, didn't stay very long in Zion, but we did one small little hike, and it was beautiful up there, although it's like the easiest to get to, so it was packed with people. And then we went down a little bit farther, got to Grand Canyon, and interestingly enough, at that point, I was a little burnt out from the road, and I was just not really doing it in a sustainable manner. And so when I got to the Grand Canyon, it was kind of like a little underwhelming, which is not what I expected. I was just like, at that point, everything started to look the same, and it was just a big thing of rocks. So I didn't actually stay in the Grand Canyon for too long, but it's funny because now that I see the picture, I'm like, wow, I can't believe I was there. But in the moment, I was like, just wanted to go home. So yeah, that was one of our last stops, and then we basically came right home. Didn't do incredibly long days, but some decently long days. And on the way home, I was impatient and took the fastest route, even though it had tolls on it, which is a big mistake. And I ended up spending like $250 in like 2 days on tolls alone because of the teardrop and everything. And yeah, it's a mess. So the New Jersey Turnpike and everything south of that. We drove like right through New York City, which was also a mistake and kind of scary, but yeah, we made it. And
What did the teardrop do to your mileage?
actually, it didn't drop that far. I think the RAV got about 27 city and a little more in the highway, and then the teardrop brought it down to like 23 or 22. So, and it was nice because at that point gas was like $2.20 out there or something. So I didn't actually spend that much money on gas.
Made up for your tolls.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So, and I didn't keep track of my money a whole lot. I definitely spent a fair amount on food. That was it. But the way I camped was there's a bunch of different apps that Tom showed me, Tom and Jen, that you can. One of them was more for like Walmarts and all the places that you can stay like that. So I stayed at some Walmarts and Cracker Barrels, which highly recommended. They're actually really nice. The Walmarts are usually pretty crowded with campers and a little bit weird, but Cracker Barrels, as long as they have like decent reviews, I found them to be super quiet and really nice. And then you can get up in the morning and get breakfast. So we only did that once, and it was not the best food. So, but that was mostly in the east. Out west, there's BLM land everywhere, which was super nice. So I just like the beginning of the day, I would look at the app and be like, oh, there's a site here that's like, I don't know, 4 or 6 hours away, and just go to that and camp out. And sometimes you get there and it's like, this is not a campsite, and I'd have to bail and go to a Walmart or something like that. But a lot of the times it was just like really nice camping. Sometimes out in the middle of nowhere. We got to Moab in Utah and did some mountain biking, but then we went to this. The maps are, I mean, they're a little deceiving because you can't tell how, like you don't know the condition of the road besides the reviews, but they're like, all the reviews say, oh, the roads are bumpy, but there's like bumpy and then there's like barely drivable bumpy. And so it was like 6 o'clock and we were driving to get to this campsite, which was like 1 mile away or something like that. But that 1 mile was on this like horrendous road, and it took us an hour and a half to get there. Just, it was like super slow and a little sketchy. And of course it's so narrow that like once you start, you can't go back. You can't, unless you're gonna back down the whole way, which is way harder. So you're kind of committed to that. So we got there late, and there wasn't actually any camp spots left. So we just went on the side of the road or tucked ourselves off the road a little bit. And then a ton of like off-road Jeeps just came like ripping by, and I was very, very jealous of their big wheels and suspension and high clearance at that point because they could actually drive. So yeah, I think I'll go into the kind of what have I learned from this. The first thing is kind of the difference between feeling lonely and being alone or being in solitude. And before going on this trip, I had experiences sort of like that. I mean, I've definitely been alone before, but I didn't really have any appreciation for its value or how hard it was at times. And so, I mean, it's one thing to be in the car for the whole day alone and just like cruising through the radio stations or whatnot. But to be like that for days on end, you start to get into a routine of just not talking to anyone, and it gets very isolating very quickly. But at the same time, you have a lot of time to think about like what's important, and if you have no space to ignore your thoughts. So if something's bothering you, you have to, I mean, you have no choice. There's no distractions or anything like that, which is hard at times, but at the same time, it has a lot of value because it forces you to evaluate what's important to you and how you really feel on certain things. And so I really grew to appreciate that feeling. And it was definitely not not easy to be like that, but I'm learning that that's a necessary part of the whole experience. I kind of mentioned this, but the reflection on values, it's I found it to be really helpful. I mean, if I was pondering things before, I had a lot of time to ponder them now and to really kind of evaluate, like, what do I want to do in the future? What do I want to do with my life? Like what are the things that really matter, and what are the things that I don't do enough of or do too much of? And that was really powerful. Looking back on it, in the moment, it was like, oh my God, I want someone to talk to. I ended up calling a lot of people on the road, which I think a lot of people do if they're traveling alone. That was nice. The discomfort of it, it goes along with a lot of what I've been saying already. And I think in general, it's healthy to push yourself a little bit. And while I had a pretty good experience, like compared to what it could have been, I still, there was times that I was really lonely and really just in my head the whole time, and kind of like questioning why I was going there or was going at all. And it was hard in the beginning, like kind of when I was in like Nebraska, Wyoming area, I would like, oh my God, why am I driving west? Like, this is the wrong direction. Like, stuff like that was hard, and just hard to kind of accept that this is what it is. But at the same time, it's valuable because it forces you to really think about like what you're doing and how you spend your time. And a lot of the time I was like, I would question whether it was valuable to be just driving for 2 months basically. And yeah, I was seeing things and I was meeting a few people, but most of it was I was just burning gas, and like at a lot of the time it felt kind of pointless. But afterwards, it's looking back, I knew that if I hadn't have gone, I wouldn't have seen that, and I don't know how my first semester at college would have been if I had just stayed at home and done whatever I was planning to do before. And this all kind of ties into the need for adventure. And there's a lot of different adventures that people can have. There's the classic vacation, or a very comfortable vacation, where you're with your family, you're going to see people or things like that, or places that you've been before, and those are fun and nice to get away. But you come away with different things, and I think one of the really important things about doing these kind of trips, like the one that I did, is that you're not in a comfortable place, and you're not in your where you feel at home and everything. And because of that, it's more of an adventure, and you're pushed a little bit. You're forced to make decisions. You're forced to you have to evaluate and make sure you're staying safe, but also both physically and mentally. And I think that kind of experience is extremely valuable. And I realized at the end that kind of experience is what I really need at certain points, in a healthy dose. And so my first adventure going to India was kind of a precursor to all of that, where it was outside of my comfort zone and had to be independent in a lot of ways, and make a different life for myself, and all the things that I was used to doing to, if I was upset or angry, I had all these ways of dealing with that. And but all of a sudden it's totally different. You can't just, like where I was in India, you can't just go for a walk in the woods or just have some peace and quiet. That doesn't really exist. Yeah, as you know. So you're forced to change in that way, which I think is very valuable. So after all of this, looking back on it, I'm not sure if I will do the same trip in the same capacity again. I think if I was to drive in the same place that I did, I would definitely go with someone and have a better setup so that I could be warm, and maybe plan it out a little bit more, although it was nice to be spontaneous like that. But I just know that I will not be able to go through the standard expectation of life without having these adventures in between, which is really valuable for me to understand at this point, so I don't get burnt out whatever I'm doing. And I think there's a lot of ideas in my head about future projects or adventures. For my Teardrop specifically, my dream would be that someone like just comes up to me and wants me to build them a fantastic teardrop and just gives me whatever to build it with, because I have so many ideas that are limited by my own budget, and so I have a lot of design improvements. And I think the next one will have to be like, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but like a stainless steel part of the outside, like halfway up, and then wood the rest of the way, or some variation of that. And definitely electrical system and insulated and all these other things. But yeah, we'll see if I get to that eventually. And in terms of adventures, I love being out west, seeing things and seeing just like totally different ways of living in day-to-day life. And I would love to spend more time there in more of a community, because I was kind of passing through and just observing little bits as I went. But definitely want to keep traveling, and yeah, we'll see what the next adventure is like. So I'm happy to open this up to questions for everyone. And
I just had a pretty basic question. How long was this trip? Like duration?
I left September 24th, I think, and I got back November 11th, something like that.
Oh, so it was in the fall. I
Yeah.
thought it was in the like, late summer.
Yeah, it was going to be in the late summer, but then I kept like pushing it back because I wasn't finished with the Teardrop.
You must have been cold in November.
Yeah, it was brutal. I remember I woke up one day and it was 0 degrees Fahrenheit, and it was so cold. I just drove for a while until I got warm and just ate when I was in a warmer place. But yeah, that was
So on your own, what did you normally eat? What kind of food did you have? Like freeze-dried stuff?
No, actually, I had a lot of camp food. I had mac and cheese a lot. I had peanut butter and jellies all the time. That was like my number one lunch, basically. That and maybe some apples or something like that, because it was just so easy to pull over on the side of the road and make a quick sandwich and keep going. I got pretty creative with like food, and one of my dishes that I would make sometimes was mac and cheese with fresh cut up tomatoes and sriracha. And I don't know if I would eat that like in a different context, but it was good in the moment. So yeah, and I had a lot of trail mix, and like I had those peanut butter filled pretzels, which are really good. Yeah.
Calories.
Yeah, exactly.
Where was the weirdest place you ever? The place that was just juxtaposition weird.
Actually, I think there's this one Walmart in Nebraska that I got to, and I had no like, I had no like idea in my mind of what Nebraska was really, and a lot of farms and stuff like that. But it was blown away by like, I got to the Walmart, it was like 8 o'clock at night, and so many people came up to me and were just like the nicest people I've ever met. Or not ever met, that's a bit of a stretch. Nicest people on the road. They would just come up and like get out and see the Teardrop and ask me all about like what I was doing, and just super nice, and would also throw in weird comments about like socialism and stuff like that. But they were just like really nice people. And that
Because
was,
of the Vermont plates.
yeah, Yeah.
Talking about burning.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, oh, if as long as the socialists don't take control or just like slip and stuff like that, it's really funny. But
I'm just a guy on the road.
yeah, I mean, in terms of people, I was surprised by that because I didn't know what to expect.
So there were a lot of people on the road, it sounds like.
Yeah, actually, a surprising amount. I mean, the national parks were quiet compared to what they usually are, but definitely pretty busy. Like I thought they would be pretty quiet. Zion was packed. I mean, not packed, but like I've never been there before, so it seemed packed to me because we got there at 8 a.m. on a Thursday morning, and we had to wait in a long line just to get into the park. I was like, what is this place? Just like in October. Yeah, it's really bizarre.
What's your plan for your next adventure?
I'm not totally sure actually. One of my if I go across the country again, I don't know how much of a reality this is going to be, but I would love to build a small, like a 2-person sit down side by side bicycle or tricycle with 2 wheels in the front, 1 wheel in the back, and then like 2 people sitting down right next to each other and have pedals kind of like a paddle boat, and then with an electric motor assist and space for some bags and stuff, and then like a covering that can be a windshield that could be removed, like rolled back, one of those like clear plastic windshields. And then so like if it was raining, it would be somewhat waterproof. But I would love to go with someone and take that across the country and have like a solar panel on top and one of those the batteries that can be charged when you're going down a hill and stuff like that. That would be super cool. I think that's my next dream for going.
Back roads only.
Yeah, exactly. I because like you can stay off the highways, but even that's super sketchy because it's like 55 or 60 miles per hour and there's no center line and no shoulder and it's like not super wide and people just cruise through. So that would be hard to navigate. So I don't know. Maybe if I found a route, or maybe I'd go into Canada or something like that. But we'll see.
Better drivers.
Yeah.
If COVID wasn't a thing, what would you have done different?
I think I would have made more of an effort to meet people and hang out with people because it was super like it was weird to show up to a campsite and there's all these people around and you can like go talk to people, but I avoided that a lot because I was like I didn't want to get into a place where I was like suddenly uncomfortable and had to like get out really quick, or not really quick, but I just didn't take that risk too often. And I think that I would have, if COVID wasn't a thing, I would have made more of an effort to reach out to people and make connections and try to travel with people. Cause I think that's a huge part of traveling, especially alone. And I probably would have stayed in certain places longer and tried to actually meet people instead of just cruise through.
And if you'd been earlier and insulated, things would have been a little different too.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I think I could have made it a little longer without like freezing every time I tried to cook
Did you
something.
think about going south?
I did, and I did it like eventually, but by the time I was south, it was like I was ready to be home. So I kind of just skipped through everything, like, and we drove through Texas in one day and didn't stop for anything. Just the upper part of it.
It's okay, it's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's still an accomplishment.
Yeah.
Well, if you got to the Grand Canyon, you're like, well, this is no big deal. It's time to come home.
Yeah. Yeah. At that point, I was like, this is not okay. I need to go home, or else I'm gonna not appreciate another park or something like that.
Anybody out there in Zoom land have any questions?
So many questions. I mean, was the cold the worst part of the trip, or was something else the worst part of the trip? And what was the best part of the trip?
I think the cold was probably, I think it was probably the worst because like it was just like the cherry on top because I was like tired and was starting to be burnt out, and then I would like finally get to a campsite after a long day of driving, and then like not be able to cook anything, and I'd have to eat like trail mix for dinner, and that was like kind of a pain. I think the best part was in Glacier National Park when I met Ben. Oh, and that other guy's name was Robert. When I met Ben and Robert, that was really fun because it was like I was like my first like human connection along the way, and which I was really needing. And also Glacier is beautiful. I didn't get up the going to the sun road. I missed it by 2 days, which was unfortunate, but yeah, I'll definitely have to go back. It's a beautiful park.
So how did the Teardrop trailer, was it nice and stable?
Yeah, it was super stable. So the wheels are really far back, which I didn't really consider before I bolted everything on. And so I kind of like, in order to move the wheels forward at this point, that would just be unreasonable. But it worked out in the end because all the weight, the center of gravity center of mass of the trailer is ahead of the axle quite a ways. And so whenever you swerve, it just like comes back immediately. And at first I was nervous that like swerving would cause it to sway like a trailer might or flip over, but it actually was super great. And sometimes I would put extra stuff right directly over the wheels on either side, and yeah, that seemed to help. For the most part it did great. Some of the back roads, there was one time when Madison was the girl I was with, who met me in Salt Lake City, and at one point in Moab she had to get out of the car and hold the trailer from flipping over as we like went over this really big rut thing. But besides that, I had no issues with it.
And the tongue weight wasn't too much?
No, I mean, it's not something you want to do all the time, but it's definitely, you can lift it up.
Yeah. What fun.
Yeah.
What was the best story you heard from random people on the trip?
Well, Robert had a lot of good stories, and I kind of forget them at this point. He just went on and on and on, and like hours later would come out of it. But I think, yeah, he definitely had the best. I mean, they were long, but he had good stories. Unfortunately, I can't remember them, but in just the small conversations that I had with people, those were fun. Just like people out there having their own time and just hilarious.
Any of them tell you, oh, there's this place that you've got to go to and now you want to go there?
Yeah, actually, a lot of people recommended Glacier, and a lot of people recommended Grand Tetons, and I unfortunately did not go there because I would have had like a 2 or 3 day window to go there, but it was like it had just snowed a bunch and the weather was going to be really cold, so I bailed out on that one. So I definitely have to go back and visit the Tetons. And I think I also wish that I had stayed a little bit longer in Yellowstone. When I went through it, there was just so many people, and I got kind of mad at like the tourism, and so I just like I just went through and didn't stop. But then looking back, I was like, wow, that was like a beautiful place that I just drove through. So.
Well, congratulations. I mean, that was quite a project and quite a trip.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dane, this is Jen. I absolutely loved your talk. Thank you so much for sharing it. And yeah, I love the fact that you'd go out on an adventure like that in your own home-built Teardrop camper, no less. You're putting Tom and I to shame in that we had all the creature comforts except when our heater failed. That definitely sent us south, maybe faster than you went south. And we had insulation even when our heater failed. So I understand what it's like to feel cold, but not at the level you did. but I just love your attitude and approach to life, and I have plenty I learned from hearing a talk like this. So thank you.
Thanks, Jen.
Well, thanks, everybody.
Okay,
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah.
Very good.
Thank you.